Kwon Tae-jun watched the numbers, a cold fury rising in his chest. His uncle had not only tried to murder him, but had also betrayed the company his father had built from the ground up. The feeling of betrayal was a bitter taste in his mouth. "He's a fool," Tae-jun said, his voice a low growl. "He thinks he's untouchable, but he's left a digital trail a mile wide." "This is not just about Sang-gu," Lee Seol said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "He's just a small part of a much larger conspiracy. The money is being funneled to a shadowy organization, a criminal syndicate that operates on a global scale. This is more than just corporate fraud. This is a front for something much darker." Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was the law office. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she answered. The lawyer's voice was crisp and professional, cutting straight to the point. "Ms. Lee, the Kwon family is ready to proceed. The terms are as we discussed. A marriage of contract for a single purpose. A significant sum for your sister's treatment in exchange for a year of your life as a wife in name only. They will not ask anything else of you, other than to live in their home and provide basic care for their heir." The offer had come like a life raft in a storm, a cold, detached, but utterly necessary transaction. Kwon Tae-jun's mind, a razor-sharp instrument of logic, connected the dots. The accident had not been a simple attempt on his life to usurp his position. It was a calculated move to remove him from the Kwon Group, an organization that was being used as a financial lifeline for a criminal enterprise. His paralysis was not just a side effect of a power grab, it was the ultimate goal, a way to make sure he could not interfere. Lee Seol closed her eyes, picturing her sister's frail smile. It was the only memory that mattered now. What was a year of her life? Her pride, her freedom, compared to her sister's, the choice was no choice at all. "I accept," she said, her voice a hollow whisper that was nonetheless firm with resolve. He had won the battle against his uncle, but the war had just begun. He had unknowingly stumbled into the heart of a global conspiracy, and he had made himself a target. The men who had tried to kill him once would not stop until they had him silenced for good. He looked at Lee Seol, his brave, brilliant wife, and knew that they were now bound together, not just by contract, but by a shared destiny. They were a team, a force against an unseen, powerful enemy. They had taken back his life and his company, but the price for that victory was now a seat at a table of power and danger they had never imagined. The next day, under a sky that had not yet shed its gray mournfulness, Lee Seol was escorted to the Kwon family estate. It was a monolith of wealth and power, a modern fortress of glass and steel that rose from a manicured landscape like a monument to cold ambition. As she was led inside, she felt a profound sense of entering a different world, one where the air was thick with unspoken rules and silent judgments. She wore a simple white dress, a stark contrast to the opulence around her, and her face, usually so expressive and warm, was a mask of professional calm. She was no longer a person, she was a contract, a solution. Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol sat in his private study, the glow of the computer screen illuminating the grim reality of their situation. The victory against Kwon Sang-gu, once a cause for celebration, now felt like a mere stepping stone in a much longer, more dangerous journey. The data Lee Seol had painstakingly retrieved from the flash drive painted a chilling picture, a criminal enterprise so vast and intricate it made Kwon Sang-gu's petty embezzlement look like a child's game. She was met in the grand foyer by the imperious matriarch of the family, Madame Yoon Ji-eun, and her son, Kwon Sang-gu. Both looked at her with thinly veiled contempt, a disdain that felt more like an insect's annoyance than a human emotion. Madame Yoon, a woman whose elegant features were hardened by years of privilege, spoke with an air of superiority. "So this is the girl. You look ordinary. Not at all what I imagined. But a contract is a contract. You are here to fulfill your duty. Nothing more. Do not presume to act as a true wife. My son, Tae-jun, would never acknowledge a low-born girl like you." "This is a ghost," Lee Seol said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This organization, they have no name, no public face. They move money through a series of untraceable transactions, using shell companies as masks. They're a spider web, and the Kwon Group was just one of their threads." Li Seol's jaw tightened, but she held her tongue. She was a doctor, a scientist. She had faced down difficult diagnoses and impossible odds. She was not about to be intimidated by a woman who saw her as little more than a servant. Taejun's mind, a razor-sharp instrument of logic, was working at a furious pace. He had been a prisoner in his own body for 2 years, but his mind had been a silent observer. He recalled conversations, subtle shifts in power, and business deals that, in hindsight, were not what they seemed. They were using my company as a front, he said, the words laced with cold fury. They wanted to control my business, to use my assets to fund their operations. That's why they wanted me out of the way, not just to take over the company, but to keep me from interfering with their plan. Kwon Sang-gu, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold eyes, snickered. Ordinary? Indeed. She doesn't have the fire or spirit, just a timid little thing. What use could she possibly be to my brother? His words were designed to wound, to remind her of her place. He had long coveted his brother's position as head of the family's multinational conglomerate, and Kwon Tae-jun's unfortunate accident had opened the door for him to act as interim CEO. He saw Lee Seol as an insignificant pawn in a game he was certain he had already won. He realized then that Kwon Sang-gu had been a fool, an arrogant pawn who had believed he was a king. The true puppeteers were still in the shadows, pulling the strings. The most damning evidence was a single, cryptic email sent to one of Kwon Sang-gu's offshore accounts. It contained a single line of text. The Viper is pleased with your progress. Lee Seol, with her hacking skills, had traced the email to a secure server. But the trail ended there. The server was a dead end, a digital fortress with no front door. As if to punctuate their disdain, a servant wheeled in Kwon Tae-jun. He was in a motorized wheelchair, his body a still, lifeless statue. He sat motionless, staring out a large window at a distant, gray horizon. His eyes devoid of emotion, his face a perfect mask of impassivity. He did not look at them, did not acknowledge their presence. It was as if he were a ghost, a mere shadow of the powerful man he once was. Rumors swirled that he had suffered a devastating brain injury in a car accident 2 years prior, leaving him paralyzed and unresponsive. The Viper, Tae-jun mused, his voice filled with a quiet dread. That's their name, a code name for the head of this organization. They're a poison, just like the one that almost killed me. Lee Seol's trained eye immediately went to him. She didn't see a broken man, she saw a patient. As she approached, she noticed the subtle tremors in his hands, the faint twitch of a muscle near his eye. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument of medical analysis, went into overdrive. This was not the typical presentation of a catastrophic brain injury. The symptoms were too precise. It was a neurological disorder, a slow, insidious degradation of his nervous system. But what could cause such a thing? Their victory had not gone unnoticed. In a lavish villa in the south of France, a man known only as the Viper watched a news report of Kwon Sang-gu's arrest. He was a man of power and influence, with a network of connections that spanned the globe. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. He had used Kwon Sang-gu as a willing accomplice, a simple-minded fool to carry out his bidding. But now, the fool had been exposed, and with him, the entire operation was at risk. Without a word, she knelt beside him, her professional demeanor overriding any personal feelings. She took his cold, limp hand in hers, her thumb gently pressing against the pulse point on his wrist. The rhythm was slow but steady. She felt his skin, cold to the touch. She gently lifted his eyelid, shining a small light from her pocket into his dark pupil. The pupil constricted, a slow but definite reaction. It was a sign of hope, a flicker of life in what they all believed to be a deadened state. "The girl," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "The one who stood beside him. Find her. Bring her to me. She is the key to all of this." Madame Yoon and Kwon Sang-gu watched her with a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "What are you doing?" "Don't touch him." Madame Yoon's voice was sharp, a command disguised as a question. His minions, a team of ruthless professionals, were dispatched to Seoul. They were ghosts, assassins who could move through the city's labyrinthine streets without leaving a trace. Their mission was simple capture: Lee Seol and use her to get to Kwon Tae-jun. Lee Seol ignored her. She was a doctor now, And this was her patient. She gently felt the muscle tone in his arms and legs. A careful, precise examination that went beyond a simple glance. The muscles were not fully atrophied. There was still a faint, lingering resistance. A sign that the motor neurons were not entirely gone. They were merely suppressed, inhibited. That night, as Lee Seol worked late in her lab, analyzing the last of the data, a chilling sense of dread washed over her. She felt like she was being watched. She dismissed it as paranoia, a side effect of the high-stakes world she had been thrust into. But her instincts were rarely wrong. Her mind raced through her research. Through the years she had spent studying neurological conditions, she recalled a rare, almost mythical neurotoxin that mimicked the symptoms of a brain injury. It was a designer poison, a substance so sophisticated that it could evade detection for years, slowly paralyzing its victim without causing death. It was a ghost, a perfect crime. But how could such a substance be in his system? The only way to administer it would be through a slow, deliberate method. This wasn't an accident, it was a murder attempt. Just as she was packing up to leave, the lab's security system flared to life. The alarm was silent, but the alert on her tablet was a clear warning, a security breach. She knew then that her fears were not unfounded. The Viper had come for her. A profound sense of dread washed over her. She had come here for a simple transaction, to save her sister. But she had stumbled into something far darker, a web of deceit and betrayal that was tangled around the very man she was now bound to. The thought was terrifying, but it also filled her with a fierce resolve. She was not just here to fulfill a contract, she was here to save a life. She quickly grabbed the flash drive, her mind racing. She had to get to Taijun. She had to warn him. But as she ran down the deserted hallway, she was met by two large, imposing men dressed in black. They were not ordinary thugs. They were professionals, and their eyes held the cold, detached gaze of killers. She stood up, her eyes meeting Kwon Sang-goo's for the first time. There was no fear in her gaze, only a cold, professional certainty that took him aback. His condition. "It is not the result of a car accident," she stated, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the tense silence of the room. "He has been deliberately poisoned. This isn't a brain injury. It's a murder attempt." "Lee Seol," one of them said, his voice a low growl. "The Viper wants to meet you." The words hung in the air, a shocking revelation that stunned everyone present. Madame Yoon's face went white. Kwon Sang-goo's easy smile vanished, replaced by a look of profound shock and barely suppressed fury. The very air in the room crackled with a new, terrifying energy. Lee Seol had just entered a game far more dangerous than she could ever have imagined. A game where the stakes were not just her sister's life, but her own. She had just laid down the first piece on a chessboard. She was determined to win. A profound sense of fear, cold and paralyzing, washed over her. She had faced down arrogant CEOs and corrupt executives. But these men were different. They were pure, unadulterated evil, a force of nature she could not fight. She knew she was outmatched. A heavy, oppressive silence fell over the grand foyer of the Kwon family estate. Lee Seol's words hung in the air, a venomous echo that seemed to poison the very atmosphere. Madame Yoon stared at her, her face a mask of disbelief and rage, as if the young doctor had just uttered a profanity. Kwon Sang-goo, his initial shock giving way to a cold, calculated fury, took a step forward. "Nonsense. A desperate attempt to gain favor. Do you think we are fools? My brother's accident was a tragedy, a terrible misfortune. How dare you come into our home and spin such a malicious tale?" His voice was a low growl, laced with a threat that was impossible to ignore. But just as they lunged for her, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Kwon Tae-jun. He was no longer the frail, helpless man they had come to expect. His body, now fully restored, moved with a speed and grace that was a testament to his recovery. He was a man reborn, a fighter who had been forged in the crucible of betrayal and pain. Lee Seol did not flinch. She met his gaze with a cool, professional defiance. "I am a medical professional, Mr. Kwon. I deal in facts, not tales. The symptoms I observed are not consistent with a severe brain injury. His body shows signs of an advanced neurological degradation caused by a specific, slow-acting neurotoxin." She turned her attention to Kwon Tae-jun, whose blank stare now seemed to hold a flicker of interest. "He requires a full neurological workup, but based on my preliminary observations, I am certain. Get away from her, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Madame Yoon scoffed, her disdainful laugh brittle in the tense room. What nonsense, you are nothing more than a glorified nurse. Are you saying the team of world-renowned specialists we hired, who have been treating my son for 2 years, were all wrong? Do not insult our intelligence. The two men exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with a flicker of professional interest. They had been told to expect a disabled man. This was a new variable. They moved in, a blur of motion, but Kwon Tae-jun was ready. He had trained tirelessly, his body now a finely tuned weapon. He moved with a brutal efficiency, using his restored strength and years of martial arts training to his advantage. He was a whirlwind of motion, a force of nature that the two men were not prepared for. I am not a nurse, Lee Seol said, her voice firm. I am a researcher specializing in neuroregenerative medicine. And yes, a team of doctors can be wrong, especially if they were looking for the wrong thing, or if the evidence was deliberately concealed. Her words were a subtle but pointed accusation, and Kwon Sang-gu's eyes narrowed. Lee Seol watched in stunned silence as he fought. He was no longer the man she had met in the wheelchair. He was a warrior, a protector, a man who would do anything to keep her safe. She saw the rage in his eyes, a profound fury that was directed at the men who had dared to harm her. He was not just fighting for his life, he was fighting for hers. Tae-jun remained silent, his gaze fixed on Lee Seol. For 2 years, he had been a prisoner in his own body, his mind a steel trap of unvoiced thoughts and emotions. He had heard the doctor's diagnoses, the pitying sighs of his family, the scorn of his uncle. He had accepted his fate. But this woman, this stranger, had just spoken words that broke through the deafening silence of his existence. He felt a faint, almost imperceptible surge of something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. In the end, Kwon Tae-jun emerged victorious. The two men lay on the floor, their bodies a testament to his newfound power. But he knew this was just the beginning. The Viper would not give up. He had sent his ghosts, and they would keep coming until he got what he wanted. The rain fell in sheets, a cold and relentless downpour that mirrored the despair pooling in Lee Seol's heart. It was a bleak Tuesday, but to her, the days had all blurred into one long, gray stretch of anxiety and exhaustion. She sat in the waiting room of the Seoul Metropolitan Hospital, the sterile scent of antiseptic doing little to calm her nerves. For weeks, every spare moment she had was spent here, a silent vigil by her younger sister, Seol-ji's bedside. The doctor's reports were a cruel litany of medical jargon, all culminating in one devastating truth. Seol-ji needed a life-saving bone marrow transplant, and the cost was astronomical. It was an amount that Lee Seol, a brilliant but modestly paid medical researcher, could not hope to earn in a lifetime. Kwon Tae-jun turned to Lee Seol, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and fear. He had promised to protect her, but he knew that he was now a target. And by extension, so was she. He had brought her into a world of darkness, a world far more dangerous than she could ever have imagined. He took her in his arms, holding her close, and whispered, "We are in this together, Seol." Until the end. Kwon Sang-gu, seeing the change in his brother's demeanor, quickly interjected, "This charlatan has a hidden agenda. Madam, she is trying to worm her way into the family's favor. Do not listen to her." She held him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come here for a contract, for a way to save her sister. But she had found something more. She had found a purpose, a partner, and a love that was forged in the fire of adversity. They had won the battle, but the war for their lives and for their future had just begun. "I don't need favor," Lee Seol said, her voice cutting through his. "I have a contract. My only concern is to fulfill its terms, which include providing care. A diagnosis is the first step of that care. If you are truly concerned for Mr. Kwon's health, you will allow me to proceed." The confrontation in the laboratory had left a deep, unsettling fear in Lee Seol's heart. Kwon Tae-jun had been a whirlwind of motion, a force of nature she had never seen before. He had fought not just with skill, but with a raw, primal fury that had sent a shiver down her spine. He was a different man, no longer the silent, impassive figure she had first met. He was a protector, a man who would do anything to keep her safe. And that realization both thrilled and terrified her. She had come to the Kwon family estate to save her sister. But in the process, she had found herself in a far more dangerous game, with her own life on the line. Her words were a masterstroke. She had used their own cold, transactional terms against them. Madame Yoon, who was obsessed with appearances and propriety, was momentarily silenced. She could not refuse without looking like she was deliberately neglecting her son's health, a scandal she would never tolerate. "Very well," she said, her voice tight with fury. "But if you are wrong, you will pay a steep price. You will be cast out, and you will not receive a single cent for your sister." The attack was a clear message from the Viper. He knew they were coming. The failed attempt to kidnap her was a warning shot, a declaration of war. Kwon Tae-jun, ever the strategist, knew they had to act quickly, before the Viper could retaliate. Their victory against Kwon Sang-gu had made them a public spectacle, and their very existence was a threat to the Shadow Organization. They were a ticking time bomb. Lee Seol nodded calmly. The stakes had been raised, but she was a gambler who had nothing left to lose. She was all in. "He'll come for us again," Tae-jun said, his voice low and serious. They were in his study, the room where they had spent so many nights unraveling his uncle's conspiracy. Now, the stakes were higher, and the enemy was more powerful than they could have ever imagined. "He won't stop until we are silenced for good, but he won't expect us to go on the offensive. He's used to operating in the shadows. It's time to bring him into the light." With the reluctant permission of the family, Lee Seol was granted access to Kwon Tae-jun's private medical suite. It was a state-of-the-art facility, a testament to the Kwon's vast wealth. As soon as the door closed behind them, shutting out the prying eyes of Madame Yoon and Kwon Sang-gu, Lee Seol's professional calm returned. She was in her element. Lee Seol, her mind a finely tuned instrument of logic and reason, agreed. "He's overconfident. He's been living in the shadows for so long that he's forgotten what it feels like to be exposed. We have the data from his network. We can use it against him. We can't fight him physically, not with his resources, but we can fight him with information." She began a meticulous, hours-long examination. She analyzed every scrap of his medical history, every MRI scan and blood test result from the past 2 years. She performed a series of reflex tests, checking his pupils, his knee-jerk reactions, and his muscle responses. She pricked his finger for a blood sample and ran it through a portable analysis device she had brought with her. The device, a prototype she had developed in her research, was designed to detect minute traces of toxins that conventional tests would miss. They worked tirelessly. A seamless team of two against the world, Lee Seol, with her exceptional hacking abilities, began to peel back the layers of the Viper's digital network. She found more than just laundered money and corporate fraud. She found evidence of human trafficking, arms dealing, and political assassination. The Viper was not just a financier, he was a monster, a criminal mastermind who had used his wealth and power to build an empire of misery and death. As the hours passed, her initial hypothesis solidified into a concrete diagnosis. The data was undeniable. His blood contained microscopic levels of a synthetic neurotoxin she had only read about in obscure scientific journals. It was a designer drug, known only to a few shadowy organizations, that had been engineered to cause a slow, progressive paralysis, mimicking the symptoms of a stroke or a traumatic brain injury. It was the perfect murder weapon, leaving no trace for the unsuspecting. As they delved deeper into the data, they discovered something even more chilling. A series of coded messages, sent from a hidden server, revealed that the Viper had a plan to eliminate them. The messages were cryptic, but their meaning was clear. He was going to attack them at their most vulnerable point. He was going to come for Lee Seol's sister. She looked at Kwon Tae-jun, who had watched her with an unwavering, silent intensity the entire time. She could feel his questions in the air. He wanted to know what she had found. She pulled a chair up to his wheelchair, her expression a mix of professional certainty and profound sadness. A cold, icy dread washed over Lee Seol, her sister, her reason for being here, her light in the darkness. She had protected her for so long, had given up everything to keep her safe. The thought of her sister in the hands of a monster like the Viper was a terror she could not bear. "I was right," she said, her voice low. "Your paralysis, it's not a brain injury. You were poisoned. The neurotoxin attacks the synaptic gaps, preventing your brain from sending signals to your muscles. Your mind is intact, but your body is a prison." "He's going to use her to get to us," Lee Seol said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "He's going to use her to force us to surrender." A subtle shudder ran through his body. His eyes, which had held a flicker of hope before, now filled with a cold, terrifying rage. He looked at her, his expression a silent scream of betrayal and anger. He wanted to speak, to lash out, to demand answers. But he couldn't. His body was a cage. Kwon Tae-jun took her in his arms, holding her close. "We won't let that happen. We will use the information to our advantage. We will create a trap, and we will catch him in it." "I understand your anger," Lee Seal said, her voice full of empathy. "I cannot imagine what it must feel like to be trapped like this. But I have a solution. It's a risk, a big one. But it's your only chance." He had a plan. He would use the information Lee Seal had uncovered to set up a sting operation. They would lure the Viper into a public confrontation, a place where he could not hide, where the police and the media would be watching. It was a risky plan, a desperate gamble, but it was their only chance. She opened a small leather briefcase she had brought with her. Inside, nestled in a foam cradle, was a single, small vial. The liquid within was a shimmering, opalescent blue, a stark contrast to the sterile white of the room. It was her life's work, a neuroregenerative serum she had been developing for years. It was still in the experimental phase, a prototype that had shown incredible promise in lab trials, but had never been used on a human. The potential for a miracle was high, but so was the risk of a catastrophic failure. The next day, Kwon Tae-jun released a new round of data to the media. The information was a bombshell. It detailed the Viper's illegal operations, his network of shell companies, and his connections to some of the world's most powerful people. The world watched in shock as the powerful facade of a renowned financial expert crumbled, revealing a monster beneath. The Viper, infuriated by the public exposure, took the bait. He contacted Kwon Tae-jun directly, demanding he retract the information and surrender. If he didn't, he would make his sister pay. This is a neuroregenerative serum. It's designed to repair and restore damaged neural pathways. In theory, it should bypass the effect of the toxin and allow your brain to reconnect with your body. But it's an untested prototype. We don't know the side effects, or if it will even work. It's a gamble, a life or death gamble. She held the vial up, its contents glowing under the fluorescent lights. "But I believe it will work. I am staking my entire professional career, my reputation, and my contract on it. I need you to trust me." "Bring her," the Viper's voice said over the encrypted line, his voice a low, threatening growl. "I have her. Come to the old warehouse on the edge of the city, alone. If you bring anyone else, your little sister dies." Kwon Tae-jun's gaze flickered from the vial to her face. He saw no greed, no deception, only a fierce, unwavering conviction. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had driven her to accept this desperate marriage. He had lived for 2 years in a world of silence and deceit. He had been a puppet, a ghost. This woman, a stranger, was offering him a chance to be human again, a chance to reclaim his life. Kwon Tae-jun, however, was not alone. He had Lee Seol, his brilliant strategist, and his heart. As they drove to the warehouse, they were a united front, a powerful force against the darkness. Kwon Tae-jun's mind was focused on one thing, a plan. He had called in the police, but they were a step behind. The Viper's men were everywhere, and the police's slow, methodical approach would be their undoing. His gaze settled on her face, and with a faint, almost imperceptible nod of his head, he gave her his consent. It was an act of profound trust, a surrender of his fate to a woman he had met just hours ago. As they entered the warehouse, the air was thick with the scent of dust and rust. The place was a cavernous, empty shell, a silent witness to a final, deadly confrontation. Lee Seal's sister, Seol-ji, was tied to a chair in the middle of the room, a man with a gun to her head. The Viper stood beside him, a sneer of triumph on his face. Lee Seol's heart pounded in her chest. She had a window of opportunity, a brief moment before Madame Yoon and Kwon Sang-gu returned. She had to act now. She grabbed a syringe from her bag, drew the shimmering blue liquid into the needle, and with a single, practiced motion, injected the serum directly into his spinal fluid. There was a sudden, sharp intake of breath from Tae-jun, a flicker of pain in his eyes that was quickly gone. It was done. The die was cast. "So you came," the Viper said, his voice full of cruel satisfaction. "I told you to come alone." She put the syringe back into her case and stood up, her heart still racing. "Now, All they could do was wait. The serum would either work and restore his nervous system, or it would fail, and she would have lost everything. Her sister's life, her freedom, her reputation. She had gambled it all on a single shot, a single act of faith. She looked at Kwon Tae-jun, whose body was now a silent vessel for her hopes and fears. He was still a statue, but now he held a secret, a profound truth that only the two of them knew. The battle had just begun, and the stakes could not be higher. "I did," Tae-jun said, his eyes filled with a cold, unwavering fury. "She is my wife. We are one. You cannot separate us." The hours that followed the injection were an agonizing test of patience. Lee Seol remained by Kwon Tae-jun's side, a silent, watchful presence, while he sat motionless in his wheelchair. As he had for 2 years, she monitored his vitals, his breathing, the faint pulse in his wrist. There was no immediate change. The silence in the room was thick with a tension that only she could feel the weight of her gamble, the hope she had placed in a single, unproven vial. She had staked her sister's future, and her own, on a theory. Now, all she could do was wait for the serum to take effect, or to fail completely. The Viper's sneer vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated rage. He had underestimated them. He had underestimated the power of their bond. He raised his hand, and the man with the gun aimed it at Solji's head. "Now, give me the data. The flash drive. The one you have been using to destroy me." The first hint of change came subtly, almost imperceptibly. It was late afternoon, and the setting sun cast long shadows across the room. Lee Seol was taking notes on her tablet, her gaze occasionally drifting to Tae-jun. She saw it then a slight, almost missable twitch. His right index finger, which had been frozen for so long, moved. It was a faint, hesitant tremor, but it was a movement. Her heart leaped into her throat. She looked closer, holding her breath. Then he did it again, a deliberate, slow flex of his finger. Lee Seol, her heart pounding in her chest, pulled out the flash drive. It was a bluff, a ruse to get him to lower his guard. The real data was already in the hands of the authorities, but the Viper didn't know that. A tear of relief, hot and sudden, traced a path down her cheek. It was a tiny victory, but for Lee Seol, it was a profound sign that her life's work had not been in vain. The serum was working. She didn't dare say a word, didn't want to alert anyone to the change, least of all the family members who would be watching them closely. Her face remained a mask of calm, but inside she was a whirlwind of elation and professional satisfaction. "The drive, now!" he screamed. Kwon Tae-jun, however, was not so composed. The slightest tremor of his finger was a monumental event for a man who had not moved a single muscle by his own will for 24 months. His mind, trapped in the cage of his body, had been screaming to get out, to move, to feel. And now, for the first time, he had felt the stirrings of life returning, a jolt of electric current, a faint, tingling sensation that coursed through his hand. It was the most incredible feeling he had ever experienced. His eyes, which had held the blank stare of a mannequin, now were filled with a raw, undeniable emotion, a potent mix of shock, hope, and an overwhelming gratitude. He looked at Lee Seol, his silent gaze speaking volumes. He had felt the prick of the needle, the cold liquid spreading through his spine. He had felt the quiet confidence in her touch, the deep conviction in her voice. He had entrusted his life to her without a word, a leap of faith born of 2 years of despair. And she had not disappointed him. This woman, who was a stranger only hours ago, had given him a piece of his life back. In that moment, a bond was forged between them, a connection stronger and more profound than any legal contract. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, the door to the medical suite opened. Kwon Sang-gu, followed by Madame Yoon, entered the room. They looked at Lee Seol with suspicion, their eyes scanning the room as if expecting to find some evidence of her incompetence. "You have underestimated us all, Viper," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You have played your hand. Now, it is time for you to lose." "Well," Madame Yoon demanded, her voice sharp with impatience, "is he cured yet? Or was it all a lie?" The police sirens filled the air. Kwon Young-jin had led them to a secret location, a hidden network of tunnels beneath the warehouse. They swarmed the place, arresting the Viper and his men. The ordeal was over. Solgi was safe. The Viper's reign of terror had come to an end. Lee Seol calmly put away her tablet. His condition is stable, but this is not a quick fix. The process will take time. The damage to his nervous system is extensive. I will need to monitor him closely for the next few weeks. Lee Seol and Kwon Tae-jun rushed to Seol-gi, untying her from the chair. She was shaken, but unharmed. They held her close, a family reunited. But even in their moment of relief, a new question arose. Kwon Tae-jun's father was not a man who was supposed to be a hero. He was supposed to be a victim, or worse, a collaborator. They had to know the truth. They had to find out why he was here, and what his role in all of this was. Kwon Sang-goo's lip curled into a sneer. Time. What a clever excuse. You've done nothing, haven't you? You're just milking this family for every penny you can get. He stepped closer to his brother, a patronizing smirk on his face. Poor Tae-jun. He gets his hopes up, and the charlatan sells him a fantasy. I told you, madam, she's a fraud. He reached out, as if to pat Tae-jun on the shoulder. The chaotic scene at the warehouse dissolved into a stunned silence as Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol stared at the man who had just saved them. It was his father, Kwon Young-jin, the man they had believed to be the Viper's accomplice, or at the very least, a powerless victim in his own home. He stood there, a quiet, formidable figure, his eyes holding a steely resolve that mirrored his son's. He was a man who had been living in the shadows, not as a victim, but as a ghost waiting for the right moment to strike. But before his hand could make contact, something happened. Slowly, deliberately, Kwon Tae-jun's left hand, the one that had been resting on the arm of his wheelchair, moved. His fingers curled into a fist, a small but powerful gesture of defiance. It was a slow, almost painful motion, but it was unmistakably his. Kwon Sang-goo's hand froze in midair. He stared at his brother's hand, his face a mask of utter shock and disbelief. Father, Tae-jun's voice was a low, incredulous whisper. The last time he had seen his father, he was a broken man, a figurehead who had lost control of his company and his family. He had been a prisoner in his own home, a silent witness to his son's slow death. But the man before him was a hero, a savior who had risked his own life to save them. Lee Seol watched, a triumphant smile hidden just beneath her composed expression. It was Kwon Tae-jun's moment, and she would not steal it. He was reclaiming his power, one tiny movement at a time. Kwon Young-jin lowered the gun, a tired but victorious look on his face. My son, he said, his voice a low rumble. You have grown into a man I am proud of. You have proven yourself worthy of the name Kwon. He looked at Lee Seol, a profound sense of gratitude in his eyes. And you, my dear, you have given me back my son. You are a true Kwon. Kwon Sang-goo's jaw dropped. What? What was that? He stammered, his bravado gone. That's not possible. The doctors said, the police, led by a seasoned detective who had been working with Kwon Young-jin, moved in and took the Viper and his men into custody. The Viper, a man who had built an empire of crime and power, was now a common criminal, his defeat a testament to the power of a father's love and a young woman's courage. The doctors were wrong. Kwon Tae-jun's voice was a low, rusty rasp, a sound that had not been heard for 2 years. It was rough, unused, but the words were clear. I am recovering. As the sirens faded into the distance, Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol took his father back to the estate. In the quiet solitude of his study, Kwon Young-jin finally revealed the truth. It was a story of a father's sacrifice, of a man who had to play a long, dangerous game to save his son. The effect of his words was immediate and devastating. Madame Yoon gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The servants in the room looked on in stunned silence. Kwon Sang-goo staggered back, his face pale with a terror he could not conceal. He had seen the proof with his own eyes. The brother he had dismissed as a living ghost, a relic of the past, was back. I knew about the Viper for years, he began, his voice filled with a quiet sadness. He was a powerful financier, a man who had built his reputation on the back of illegal deals. He had infiltrated my company, using it as a front for his criminal operations. He had dirt on me, on our family, on our entire company. He had a network of spies in every corner of our lives. And I knew that if I fought him directly, he would destroy us all. Kwon Tae-jun, with Lee Seol's support, was no longer a victim. He was a force to be reckoned with. The light in his eyes, once a mere flicker, now blazed with a fierce, unwavering intensity. He looked at Lee Seol, a profound sense of gratitude and admiration in his gaze. He had been a prisoner, but she had given him the key. Now, with his mind and body slowly reconnecting, he was ready to take back his life and expose the truth behind his betrayal. Kwon Sang-gu, his plot now revealed, had just made a terrible mistake. He had underestimated the woman who had come to save his brother. He had been forced to play along, to act as a willing accomplice. He had given in to the Viper's demands, had signed off on the illegal deals, had allowed his company to be used as a laundromat for the Viper's dirty money. But all the while, he had been fighting back in the shadows, collecting evidence, building a case against him. The grand foyer, once a stage for Kwon Sang-gu's contemptuous theatrics, was now a silent testament to his profound shock. The faint, rasping words from Kwon Tae-jun had been more powerful than any thunderclap, and the sight of his hand, a fist of defiance, had been a dagger plunged into his arrogant heart. The man he had thought to be a vegetable, a harmless relic, was coming back to life. A ghost was walking again. "When you were poisoned," he said, looking at Tae-jun, a profound pain in his eyes. "I knew it was him, but I couldn't do anything. My every move was being watched. My only option was to play along, to act as if I was a broken man who had accepted his fate. I had to make him believe that I had given up. That was the only way I could keep you safe." Kwon Sang-gu's mind raced, a frantic scramble to process this impossibility. He had personally overseen the plot, had ensured the poison was administered slowly and undetectably. The doctors he had bribed, the reports he had forged, it had all been a flawless plan. Yet here was his brother, not only speaking but moving, and a woman he had dismissed as a simple pawn was standing beside him, a triumphant look in her eyes. The terror in his heart was a cold, sickening reality. He revealed a secret vault hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside, he had kept a meticulous record of the Viper's every illegal transaction, every coded message, every hidden account. It was a mountain of evidence, a testament to his years of silent struggle. He had also been working with a small, elite team of international police officers who had been building a case against the Viper from the shadows. This is a trick," he stammered, his voice a pathetic shadow of its former booming self. "Some kind of temporary muscle spasm. It means nothing. I had to keep you alive. My son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew you were the only one who could stop him. I knew you had the courage and the strength. And then Lee Seol came. I saw her brilliance, her courage. I knew that with her by your side, you could do what I could not." Kwon Tae-jun, however, was not listening. His eyes were fixed on Lee Seol, a profound depth of emotion in their gaze. "Thank you," he said, the words still rough, but filled with a sincerity that was 100 times more eloquent than any speech. Lee Seol smiled, a genuine, warm expression that erased the professional mask she had worn. "The fight is not over," she whispered back, a silent promise. He had been the one who had sent the contract to Lee Seol, not out of a need for a wife for his son, but as a way to bring a powerful ally into the Kwon family. He had been the one who had ensured her contract was ironclad, her sister's treatment fully paid for. He had been the one who had orchestrated the entire thing, a desperate gamble to save his son and his family. Over the next several weeks, Kwon Tae-jun's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. With Lee Seol's continued treatment and his own indomitable will, the man who had been confined to a wheelchair was now able to stand, to take a few wobbly steps with assistance. His voice grew stronger, his mind sharper. He was no longer a ghost in his own home. He was a living, breathing testament to Lee Seol's brilliance and the depth of her courage. Tae-jun was in awe, his heart filled with a mixture of love and respect for his father. He had never imagined the depth of his father's sacrifice. He had been a hero, a man who had fought a war in the shadows, alone and in silence, all to protect his son. He had underestimated his father's strength, his love, his profound sense of duty. Kwon Sang-gu's paranoia grew with each passing day. He watched his brother with a hawk-like intensity, his mind churning with questions. How had she done it? What kind of power did she possess? He couldn't shake the feeling that Lee Seol was more than just a doctor. She was a threat, a brilliant, unassuming woman who had single-handedly thwarted his plans. Lee Seol, with her keen eye for detail, found a final message from Kwon Young-jin hidden in a small, encrypted file. It was a simple message, meant for Kwon Tae-jun's eyes only. The balance of power in the Kwon family estate shifted dramatically. The servants, who had once treated Kwon Tae-jun with pity and deference, now looked at him with a mixture of awe and respect. Madam Yoon, ever the opportunist, began to shower him with attention, feigning concern and affection. But Kwon Tae-jun saw through her hollow gestures. He knew that her loyalty, like his uncle's, was a fragile thing, easily broken when it no longer served her. My son, the viper is just the head of the snake. The true power is in the shadows. The men who run this organization are a secret society of power and wealth. They are everywhere. They are the ones who are truly in control. I have left you a final gift. The data you now possess is the key. You have the power to destroy them, but you will need to be stronger than ever. You have a powerful weapon by your side. Her name is Lee Seol. She is the light that will guide you in the darkness. Do not let her go. It was in this new atmosphere that Lee Seol and Kwon Tae-jun began their strategic partnership. They would meet in his private study, a room now filled not with the silence of despair, but with the quiet hum of a resurrected mind at work. Kwon Tae-jun had been a brilliant businessman before the accident, and his mind, now free from the paralysis of his body, was a formidable weapon. He had spent 2 years observing, listening, and plotting, a silent watcher in the shadows. He knew every move his uncle had made, every crooked deal, every lie. The words hung in the air, a final revelation from a man who had given up everything to save his son. Kwon Young-jin had not just given them evidence, he had given them a mission. The war was not over. It had just begun. Lee Seol, with her expertise in data analysis and cybernetics, was the perfect complement to his strategic mind. She began with the company's financial records, the intricate web of transactions and accounts that Kwon Sang-gu had woven to conceal his theft. She used her skills to hack into the company's private servers, a digital ghost in the machine. She discovered millions of dollars funneled into shell corporations, money that had been siphoned away from the company's assets to fuel Kwon Sang-gu's lavish lifestyle and to pay off his associates. The final message from Kwon Young-jin was not just a revelation, it was a call to arms. Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol, now with a deeper understanding of the labyrinthine plot they had stumbled into, realized that the Viper was just the beginning. The man was a criminal mastermind, but he was merely ahead of a much larger, more monstrous Hydra, a secret society of power and wealth that operated in the shadows, controlling everything from global finance to political elections. They were everywhere, and they were the ones who were truly in control. He's been bleeding the company dry, Lee Seol said one evening, pointing to a complex spreadsheet on a large screen. These transactions are disguised as legitimate business expenses. It's a textbook case of embezzlement. The money is being funneled to offshore accounts. Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol had a choice. They could expose the truth and risk everything, or they could live in fear, forever looking over their shoulders. The choice was easy. They had fought too hard, had sacrificed too much, to give up now. They would finish what his father had started. They would bring the entire organization down. But just as he spoke, a flash of motion came from the side of the room. A single, powerful shot rang out, hitting the man with the gun in the arm. The man cried out in pain, dropping the gun. The Viper, shocked by the sudden attack, turned to see Kwon Tae-jun's father, Kwon Young-jin, standing in the shadows, a smoking gun in his hand. Their work became a meticulous, tireless crusade. Lee Seol, with her expertise in data analysis and cybernetics, began to decrypt the mountain of evidence his father had left behind. The data was a puzzle, a series of encrypted files and coded messages that revealed the inner workings of the organization. She found connections between prominent politicians, powerful business leaders, and even members of the royal family. It was a web of deceit so vast and intricate it was almost unbelievable. They worked tirelessly. A silent team united by a common goal, they compiled a comprehensive dossier of Kwon Sang-gu's illegal activities, a mountain of evidence that would be impossible to deny. They had a plan. They would wait for the right moment, for a public event where Kwon Sang-gu would be at his most arrogant and vulnerable, and they would expose him to the world. "They're a Hydra," Lee Seol said one evening, pointing to a complex chart on the screen. "If you cut off one head, another one will grow in its place. We can't just expose one person. We have to expose the entire organization at once. We have to hit them where it hurts the most, their reputation and their power. That moment came sooner than they expected. Kwon Sang-gu, confident in his position as interim CEO, called a press conference to announce a major new business deal, one that would cement his legacy and make him appear a true leader. The press conference was a glittering affair, a spectacle of power and wealth. Kwon Tae-jun, his mind now fully restored and sharper than ever, developed a strategic plan. He would use the Kwon Group's vast resources to his advantage. He would call a global press conference, a final, monumental event that would expose the entire organization to the world. But he knew they would not go down without a fight. They would come for him, for Lee Seol, for anyone who dared to stand in their way. As Kwon Sang-gu stood at the podium, basking in the glow of the flashbulbs, he felt a sense of supreme victory. He had won. His brother was a relic of the past, and the company was his to control. He looked out at the sea of reporters, his smile confident, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "They won't be able to attack us directly," Tae-jun said, a flicker of grim determination in his eyes. "We're a public spectacle. Any direct attack on us would only confirm their existence. But they will try to sabotage our efforts. They will try to silence us before we can speak. We need to be one step ahead of them. I am proud to announce that the Kwon Group is entering a new era of prosperity," he began, his voice booming with false authority. "Under my leadership, we will continue to grow and expand, to reach new heights of success." They worked in secret, a small team of two against the world. They were aided by the small, elite team of international police officers Kwon Young-jin had been working with. The police, who had been building their own case against the organization for years, were in awe of the evidence they had compiled. It was a treasure trove of information that would bring down some of the most powerful people in the world. But before he could continue, a voice, a familiar voice, cut through the applause. An era of prosperity built on a foundation of lies and deceit. The day of the press conference arrived. The event was a global spectacle, with reporters from all over the world in attendance. Kwon Tae-jun stood at the podium, his voice strong and his gaze unwavering. He was no longer a victim, he was a leader, a man who had been reborn in the fires of adversity. Lee Seol stood by his side, a silent, powerful force, the woman who had not only saved his life, but had also given him a purpose. All eyes turned to the back of the room. There stood Kwon Tae-jun, his body now upright and strong, his eyes blazing with a fierce, unwavering resolve. By his side, silent and powerful, stood Lee Seol. They were a vision of justice, a symbol of a force that Kwon Sang-gu had underestimated and, in his arrogance, had ignored. He began by telling his story, the story of his paralysis, of the conspiracy to steal his company, and of the brave woman who had saved him. The reporters listened in stunned silence, their cameras flashing wildly. But the most shocking part was yet to come. Kwon Sang-gu's face drained of all color. He stared at his brother, his mind unable to comprehend what he was seeing. It was a ghost, a vengeful ghost from his past, come back to haunt him. The flashbulbs went wild, capturing the moment for all to see. The silence that followed was deafening, a silence filled with the weight of a monumental betrayal. The battle had just been joined, and the master of the house had returned to reclaim his throne. "What I am about to reveal," he said, his voice now a powerful rumble, "is not just a story of corporate fraud. It is a story of a global conspiracy, a secret society of power and wealth that has been operating in the shadows for years. They are the ones who tried to kill me. They are the ones who tried to silence me. And they are the ones who will be brought to justice." The silence that followed Kwon Tae-jun's dramatic appearance was more deafening than any applause. It was the silence of a house of cards, now trembling on the verge of collapse. The reporters, seasoned veterans of corporate intrigue, held their cameras aloft, their faces a mixture of professional curiosity and genuine astonishment. This was the story of a lifetime, the return of a man believed to be a ghost, and the unmasking of his betrayer, all playing out on live television. He nodded to Lee Seol. She plugged a flash drive into the main screen, and the room was plunged into a shocking display of evidence, financial records, coded messages, and pictures of prominent figures at secret meetings. The evidence was irrefutable, a clear and damning indictment of the entire organization. The world watched in stunned silence as the truth was revealed, as a powerful network of corruption and deceit was exposed for all to see. Kwon Sang-gu, frozen at the podium, his face a mask of profound terror. could only stare at his brother. The microphone in his hand felt like a lead weight. He wanted to speak, to deny it all, but the words were caught in his throat. His mind was a frantic, desperate place, searching for a way out of this nightmare. He had gambled everything on his brother's permanent incapacitation. He had cheated, lied, and stolen, all to get to this moment, to this podium. And now, in a single, terrifying instant, it had all been for nothing. The aftermath was a whirlwind of chaos and injustice. The police, now armed with an unprecedented amount of evidence, moved in and arrested the members of the secret society. The world watched in shock as powerful men and women, who had once been untouchable, were brought to their knees. It was a monumental victory, a triumph of justice over power, of courage over corruption. He claims to have been leading the company into a new era of prosperity, Kwon Tae-jun said, his voice echoing with a calm authority that silenced the buzzing cameras. But what he won't tell you is how he plans to achieve it. By plundering the company's assets and selling off its most valuable subsidiaries for a fraction of their worth, Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol, their mission complete, watched the news reports from the privacy of their home. They had won. They had brought down a monster, had finished what his father had started. They had proven that even the most powerful men and women could be brought to justice. Their victory was a testament to the power of their bond, to the strength of their love, and to the courage of a young woman who had dared to stand up to the world for her sister. He turned to Lee Seol, who was now holding a small, silver flash drive. With a nod, she strode purposefully to the main projector, plugging the device into the laptop on the podium. The screen, which had moments ago displayed a glowing presentation about Kwon Sang-goo's grand plans, now showed a series of spreadsheets, financial records, and emails. It was a comprehensive, damning dossier of his every illegal transaction. The numbers didn't lie. They were a cold, hard indictment of his greed and corruption. The world watched in stunned silence as the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The arrests of the secret society's members sent shockwaves across the globe, bringing down some of the most powerful people in the world. The investigation, led by Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol, had exposed a network of deceit and corruption so vast and intricate that it was almost unbelievable. It was a monumental victory, a triumph of justice over power, of courage over corruption. These are the financial records of the past 2 years, Lee Seol announced, her voice clear and precise. They detail the millions of dollars that were siphoned from the Kwon Group's accounts, funneled through a series of shell corporations, and deposited into offshore accounts under Mr. Kwon Sang-goo's name. Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol watched the news reports from the privacy of their home, the silence in the room filled with a profound sense of peace. They had done it. They had brought down a monster, had finished what his father had started. They had proven that even the most powerful men and women could be brought to justice. Their victory was a testament to the power of their bond, to the strength of their love, and to the courage of a young woman who had dared to stand up to the world for her sister. The reporters' murmurs erupted into a frenzy of questions. They had their story, and it was even bigger than they had imagined. Kwon Sang-goo, seeing the evidence against him laid bare for the world to see, finally snapped. He lunged for the flash drive, a wild, desperate look in his eyes. But a group of security guards, who had been secretly alerted by Kwon Tae-jun, moved in and restrained him. With the threat of the secret society gone, Kwon Tae-jun was free to reclaim his life. He returned to the Kwon Group as its rightful chairman, his presence a symbol of a new era of transparency and integrity. He and Lee Seol worked together, a powerful force of two, to rebuild the company, to restore its reputation, and to lead it into a future built on honesty and ethical values. "You've been planning this," he screamed, his face contorted with rage. "You never went into a coma. You were faking it all this time, weren't you?" Their journey had been a long and arduous one, a path paved with pain, betrayal, and sacrifice. But in the end, it had led them to a place of profound happiness. The contract they had signed, a simple piece of paper that had bound them together, was now a symbol of their love. It was a love that had been forged in the crucible of adversity, a love that had grown stronger with each passing day. "I was a victim, not an actor," Kwon Tae-jun said, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel. "And the evidence of your crimes is now in the hands of the police. You are finished." A year after the final confrontation, Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the same ocean that had been a silent witness to their struggles. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow on the water. They were not just a couple, they were partners in life, in love, and in purpose. Lee Seol's sister, now fully recovered and living a happy, healthy life, was a testament to their love, a living symbol of the courage and sacrifice they had made for each other. The sound of police sirens filled the air. They were there to take Kwon Sung-gu into custody. He was a broken man, his empire of lies reduced to dust. As he was led away in handcuffs, he screamed obscenities and threats, but no one was listening. He had brought this upon himself, and his arrogance had been his ultimate downfall. Kwon Tae-jun took Lee Seol's hand in his touch gentle and loving. "I am forever indebted to you," he said, his voice a low, sincere whisper. "You saved my life, my family, my company, but most importantly, you taught me the true meaning of love." The press conference became a triumph for Kwon Tae-jun and Lee Seol. They held a brief Q&A session, where Kwon Tae-jun explained the truth behind his illness and recovery, giving all the credit to the woman by his side. "This woman," he said, his hand resting on Lee Seol's shoulder, "is a medical genius. She not only saved me, but she also saved this company. She is the true hero of this story." Lee Seol smiled, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "I didn't save you," she said. "We saved each other. We were two broken people who found a purpose in each other. You gave me hope, and I gave you a reason to fight. Our journey was not a mistake. It was destiny." As the press conference ended, Kwon Tae-jun turned to Lee Seol, a new kind of look in his eyes. It was no longer just gratitude. It was a deep, profound admiration. She had stood by him, had fought with him, had risked her life for him, and in the process, had become his closest confidant and his greatest ally. He had promised her his protection and a cure for her sister, but she had given him so much more. She had given him his life back. He pulled her close, holding her in a warm, loving embrace. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the stars began to twinkle in the night sky. They stood there for a long time, two souls united by a love that had triumphed over darkness, a love that was a testament to the strength of their bond. But even in their moment of victory, a sense of unease lingered. Kwon Tae-jun, with his mind now clear and his body restored, had begun to piece together the events leading up to his accident. The poison was too sophisticated, too precise. It was not something a man like Kwon Sung-gu, a simple embezzler, could have procured on his own. He was merely a pawn, a willing tool in a much larger game. Their story was not about a disabled CEO and a young woman who saved him. It was a story about two people who, in the face of despair, found courage in each other. It was a story about a love that had been forged in the fire of adversity, a love that had grown stronger with each passing day, a love that would last forever. Their life together was a new beginning, a testament to the power of love, courage, and a new life. That night, in the quiet solitude of his study, he and Lee Seol sat down to analyze the data from the flash drive. The records were even more complex than they had first appeared. The shell corporations were part of a larger network of international accounts. The money wasn't just being stolen, it was being laundered. The embezzled funds were being used to pay off other, even more powerful individuals.